The allegations Meghan has made are simply not true. Her account does not reflect what actually happened, and it has led the public to a deeply misleading impression. That version of events has no basis in.
Prince Harry had prepared himself for rejection, criticism, and even permanent exile from royal life. But nothing prepared him for the sentence printed beneath the palace crest. His children had not merely been pushed further from the crown. Their future royal titles had been formally removed. As he reached the final paragraph, his hands began to shake. Then the Duke lowered the document, covered his face, and broke down in tears before anyone could speak. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry stared at the pages across the table in Montecito. Meghan stood beside him, watching the color leave his face as he reached the names of Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. The palace crest, the official symbol printed on royal documents, made the decision impossible to dismiss as rumor. Buckingham Palace had confirmed that both children would remain in the family line, yet they would never inherit, use, or receive working royal titles as adults. The distinction cut deeply. A working royal title is more than a family style. It connects its holder to public duties, official patronages, and service on behalf of the monarch. The amended royal framework, a set of rules defining future roles, separated hereditary succession from royal responsibility. Charles had approved it. Senior members of the household had endorsed it. The judgment reached far beyond ceremony. Meghan reached for the paper when Harry stopped breathing for seconds. He pushed the final page toward her and asked her to read it aloud because his voice would not come. She spoke carefully, but each word made his expression collapse. His grief was not about rank alone. He believed his choices, his departure, and his conflict with the institution had created consequences for two children who never entered that fight. Then Harry saw William's signature. The discovery changed sorrow into disbelief. Charles's approval wounded him, but his brother's endorsement felt like betrayal. Harry had believed the future king might oppose him, criticize him, even shut him out, but would never allow Archie and Lilibet to become permanent casualties of their estrangement. A palace aide called minutes later on an official line. The message was direct. There would be no automatic review, no household appeal, and no later path for the children to reclaim what had been removed. Harry ended the call, set the document down, and wiped his face. He wanted William directly, not as a prince facing an heir, but as one father confronting another. But before that call, Harry had to accept a truth. Everyone in this family had something different to lose. Behind the palace language were two children who had never chosen a side. Archie knew Britain largely through stories, photographs, and the memories his father carried across the Atlantic. Lilibet bore the private family name of a great-grandmother she barely had time to know. Yet their futures had now become the center of a royal reckoning. For Harry, Meghan, Charles, and William, the decision exposed four very different versions of duty: protection, regret, and responsibility. Meghan sat beside Harry as the silence hardened around them. She did not cry. Anger reached her first. Archie and Lilibet still remained members of the extended royal family and kept their places in the line of succession, the official order showing who could one day inherit the crown. But the ruling closed every future path toward ceremonial rank, official patronage, and recognition as working royals. Harry read the paragraph again while Meghan questioned every word. She told him the children were being punished for choices made by adults. Their son and daughter had never resigned from royal duty, criticized the palace, or chosen life in California. Yet the consequence had reached them anyway. To her, the decision turned a family conflict into an inherited penalty. Harry understood her fury, but guilt kept him quiet. Across the Atlantic, Charles stood alone at Clarence House with a framed photograph of Archie as a baby. The king had defended the ruling as necessary because the monarchy could not promise future public authority without service, residence, and accountability. A working royal carries out duties for the sovereign and represents the institution in public. Charles believed that responsibility had to mean something. Still, he could not look at his grandson's photograph without feeling the cost. Camilla entered and found him holding the frame. The queen consort asked whether he regretted the decision. Charles answered that he could defend it as monarch, but could not pretend it did not wound him as a grandfather. She reminded him that protecting the crown often demanded choices no family would willingly make. He placed the photograph down, but his hand remained on the frame. William carried a different burden. Catherine found him alone, rereading the final authorization page. The Princess of Wales asked why he had delayed signing it for 3 days. He admitted that he knew exactly what Harry would see in his approval. Not structure, not duty, betrayal. Months earlier, Harry had privately asked Charles to guarantee that Archie and Lilibet's future standing would never change because of their parents' conflict with the palace. The king never gave formal approval, but his gentle reply sounded like reassurance. Harry had believed it was a promise. To understand why Charles broke what his son thought had been protected, the story had to return to the ceremony that changed everything. The palace decision did not begin with a legal document or a council meeting. It began beneath the chandeliers of St. James's Palace, during a ceremony intended to celebrate the monarchy's next generation. One empty place card, one unexpected announcement, and one private confrontation changed the atmosphere completely. Those present would later remember the moment William folded the ceremonial program in half, Charles dismissed the room, and Harry's name entered a discussion that would eventually determine the futures of Archie and Lilibet. Senior royals had gathered for a private succession rehearsal, introducing future ceremonial responsibilities for George, Charlotte, and Louis. A succession rehearsal is a closed preparation meeting used to organize roles connected to the monarchy's next generation. The event mattered because every name in the program suggested who would remain visible, trusted, and included when the crown entered its next chapter. Harry had asked for Archie and Lilibet to be acknowledged as future members of the wider royal household. The children were absent, but their father wanted their names printed beside their cousins as proof that distance had not erased them. William noticed the proposed line immediately. The prince said nothing at first, yet his expression tightened as the program reached his hands. Then an aide delivered the announcement that changed everything. Harry intended to release a public statement describing his children as guaranteed future representatives of the crown. William objected at once. No guarantee had been approved, he warned, and no private reassurance could be presented as settled royal policy. Charles dismissed the room and called his younger son from an adjoining chamber. The king kept his voice controlled, but the pressure was unmistakable. Harry insisted through the recorded secure call that he was protecting Archie and Lilibet from being quietly erased. His father warned that claiming an unapproved royal future would force the palace to deny him publicly. William lifted the printed program and removed the line containing the Sussex children's names. He folded the page once, placed it beside Charles, and stepped back. The gesture was calm. Its meaning was not. Family sympathy had collided with institutional control, and neither could survive unchanged. Palace advisors reopened an unfinished framework, created after Harry and Meghan stepped away from working duties. The framework was a proposed set of rules linking future titles to active service, residence, and direct responsibility to the monarch. It had once been considered too severe. Now it looked unavoidable. Charles waited until the room emptied. Then the king closed the doors and instructed his constitutional secretary to complete the policy. A constitutional secretary advises the sovereign on decisions affecting royal authority and continuity. Still, he demanded one final private meeting with Harry before signing anything. That meeting offered one last chance to stop the decision. Instead, it would destroy what little trust remained. There were no cameras, no courtiers, and no prepared statements when Harry entered the private room at Windsor. Charles stood beside the fireplace with the unfinished framework resting on a small table. William waited near the window, silent but unmistakably involved. The Duke did not bow. He did not sit. He looked first at his father, then at his brother, and delivered the sentence that shattered the room. "Whatever you think of me, do not make my children pay." Harry had traveled secretly to Windsor because he wanted no aides, no lawyers, and no official language standing between them. Once the doors closed, the conversation became entirely personal. The framework on the table was a proposed set of rules, deciding who could receive future titles and official roles. Charles explained that it would not remove Archie and Lilibet from the family or the line of succession. It would only reserve working royal status for those raised to serve the crown in Britain. Harry heard punishment, not policy. He turned toward William and accused him of building a neutral-looking system designed to exclude two specific children. The prince did not raise his voice. He said the monarchy could not promise public authority to people who might never live in the country, perform royal duties, or answer directly to the sovereign. That answer only deepened the wound. Harry seized the draft and searched for his children's names. His hands tightened around the pages before he dropped them onto the table. His voice cracked as he said Archie and Lilibet were being judged before they were old enough to understand what a title meant. William replied that waiting would not make the question disappear. It would only make the eventual decision more painful. Charles moved between his sons and offered a compromise. The king proposed delaying the framework until Archie reached adulthood, giving the family years to repair itself. Harry looked at his father with sudden hope. William destroyed it almost immediately. The future king warned that postponement would transfer the crisis into his reign. He would then be forced to decide the children's status after years of public expectation, family resentment, and political pressure. Delay, he argued, would not protect them. It would create a larger humiliation later. William finally admitted what he had feared from the beginning. Royal titles could one day be used commercially or politically without accountability to the crown. Harry heard Meghan's name inside the accusation, even though his brother never spoke it. He moved toward the door. Before leaving, Harry faced Charles and gave him one final warning. Signing the framework would end any belief that Archie and Lilibet still had a home inside the royal family. Charles said nothing. Harry believed the ultimatum might stop him. But behind closed doors, the machinery of royal power was already moving. The public would see Charles's name and assume the king had acted alone. Inside the palace, however, the decision had passed through a far more complicated chain of influence. William pressed for clarity. Constitutional advisors demanded consistency. Senior courtiers feared another decade of uncertainty. Yet one person still possessed the power to stop the document: Charles himself. On the final evening, he sat alone with a pen in his hand and discovered that authority could feel almost identical to helplessness. Charles listened as advisors explained the limits of what could be changed. Archie and Lilibet's family identity could not simply be erased, but future working titles, ceremonial positions, and formal appointments still fell under the monarch's authority. A formal appointment is an official role granted by the sovereign, usually carrying public duties or responsibility. That distinction mattered because the palace was not denying blood. It was controlling future power. William faced a different pressure. As heir, he had been asked to endorse any framework that would continue into his eventual reign. The prince refused to inherit an unresolved arrangement that could create competing expectations between his children and Harry's. He believed uncertainty would become more dangerous with time, especially if the public began treating private assurances as permanent royal promises. Charles dismissed his private secretary and remained alone in the signing room. The king held the pen above the page, but his hand would not move. A photograph of both sons stood nearby. Taken before distance, interviews, and public accusations had hardened every disagreement. He understood the document as sovereign. He felt it as a father. Camilla entered quietly and watched him hesitate. The queen consort asked whether he was protecting the crown or reacting to the pain Harry had caused him. Charles answered that every option felt like betrayal. Signing would wound his younger son. Refusing would leave William to face the same crisis later. She did not tell him what to choose. She only warned that delay was also a decision. Catherine challenged William in private. The Princess of Wales accepted that the institution needed clarity, but she told him Harry would not read the framework as policy. He would read it as the rejection of Archie and Lilibet. She urged her husband to call his brother before the announcement. William looked at the authorization page but did not reach for the phone. Advisors delivered the final pressure through a documented briefing. Harry's planned guarantee could create expectations the palace had never approved. If the crown remained silent, the public might interpret that silence as consent. Shortly before midnight, Charles signed. William added his endorsement, closed the folder, and instructed an aide to warn Harry privately before dawn. By sunrise, the palace had gained certainty, but from Windsor to Montecito, certainty had already begun to feel like devastation. The announcement lasted only minutes. Its consequences began instantly. Television banners repeated the children's names, while commentators examined language that had been written to sound impersonal. In Montecito, Harry turned off every screen in the house. At Windsor, William watched the statement delivered without celebration. Charles remained behind closed doors. The monarchy had presented a unified decision to the world, yet inside the family, each person reacted as though something private and irreplaceable had just been lost. Buckingham Palace released a brief confirmation, stating that future royal titles and official roles would be reserved for descendants prepared for active service under the sovereign. Active service means carrying out regular public duties on behalf of the monarch while remaining accountable to the royal household. The policy mattered because it did more than limit ceremonial language. It closed the path through which Archie and Lilibet might one day have returned as working members of the institution. Palace staff acted immediately. Archie and Lilibet were removed from draft ceremonial records that had included them in future family events, and courtiers were ordered to avoid any wording suggesting guaranteed public positions when the children became adults. The decision now had practical consequences. It would shape how they appeared in official plans, how the palace described them, and how history recorded their place. Harry tried to hide his tears, but Archie noticed. The boy asked whether something bad had happened in England. His father knelt beside him and struggled to speak. Finally, he said that adults had made a decision the children did not deserve to carry. Archie did not fully understand, yet he reached toward him, making Harry's composure collapse again. Meghan closed the laptop showing the palace statement. She told Harry that silence would allow strangers to define their children's worth. The Duchess wanted an immediate response, but he refused to speak while grief still controlled him. She saw restraint. He felt paralysis. Their communications team soon delivered a drafted statement, accusing the institution of applying separate standards to different branches of the family. Harry read every line. The anger sounded familiar, almost comforting, but he would not authorize its release. Then William sent a private message. "I did not sign this because I stopped loving them." Harry stared at the sentence, before placing his phone face down. He offered no reply. Hours later, a personal message arrived from Charles. The king asked for one final conversation without lawyers, advisors, or prepared statements. Harry remained silent until evening, then agreed under one condition. William could not be present. For the first time, titles would disappear from the argument, leaving only a father, a son, and the damage neither could hide. When Charles appeared on the private video call, he wore no uniform, no decorations, and no expression of royal authority. Harry sat alone, his eyes swollen from a sleepless night. For several seconds, neither man spoke. The document that had divided them was no longer visible, yet its presence filled the silence. Then the king addressed him not as the Duke of Sussex, but simply as his son, and admitted that the decision had cost him more than the palace statement would ever reveal. Charles had insisted that no aides, secretaries, lawyers, or family members join the conversation. Harry agreed, but only after receiving written confirmation that no recording or official summary would be created. An official summary is the palace account used to preserve what was discussed for institutional records. This call would create no such protection. Every word would remain between father and son. The king explained his boundary carefully. The monarchy could not guarantee future offices to children who might choose private lives and never serve the crown. A royal office is a recognized public position, involving duties performed for the sovereign. Charles insisted that the ruling did not remove Archie and Lilibet from his family, his memory, or his affection. Harry rejected the distinction immediately. He said the crown had always mixed family and institution, whenever doing so protected its image. Now the palace wanted to separate them only after his children had lost something. Private love, he argued, meant little when the public door had already been closed. Charles did not defend himself. The king admitted that he had failed to prepare his son honestly. Months earlier, his compassionate reply had sounded like a permanent promise, even though no constitutional guarantee had been given. He apologized for allowing hope to grow where certainty never existed. Harry looked toward the prepared statement lying beside him. It condemned the palace, accused the family of inherited punishment, and threatened to reopen every wound. Charles asked whether he intended to release it. "I have not decided," Harry answered. The silence returned. Charles then offered the only guarantee he could make without changing the framework. Archie and Lilibet would always be invited to private family occasions. They would be recognized as his grandchildren without cameras, press conditions, or demands for royal service. The promise was personal, not constitutional, but the king gave it directly and without hesitation. Harry ended the call without offering forgiveness. Yet he picked up the accusatory statement, read its final line, and tore it in half. He would speak publicly, but he would not escalate the war. He would speak as a father, and define his children beyond the titles they had lost. That choice changed the crisis. Then the world delivered its own verdict. By morning, The royal ruling had escaped the language of constitutional procedure and become a national argument about children, privilege, punishment, and belonging. Some praised the palace for drawing a necessary boundary around public duty. Others saw two young lives bearing the consequences of an adult family feud. Then one newspaper published an image that captured the entire crisis. Harry holding Archie's hand beneath a headline declaring, "A prince without a palace, a child without a choice." Broadcasters divided almost immediately. One network described the decision as modernization, arguing that royal status should follow public service rather than blood alone. Another called it the most personal consequence of the Sussex departure. Constitutional procedure means the formal process through which the monarchy organizes authority and responsibility. But the public was no longer discussing procedure. People were asking whether Archie and Lilibet had been treated fairly. Palace communications staff refused to expand upon the written framework. They believed further explanation would transform a controlled institutional decision into a public argument with Harry. Every additional sentence risked sounding defensive. Every clarification risked exposing the family pain behind the official language. Silence protected the crown, but it also allowed the harshest interpretation to spread. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered beside the gates. One woman placed 2 white roses beneath a handwritten card bearing Archie and Lilibet's names. The gesture was quiet, but cameras captured it. Another visitor argued nearby that titles must require service, and that no child should receive a future public role automatically. Harry watched the footage from California without speaking. The Duke saw the roses, read the card, and began crying again. His tears were no longer about ceremonial rank. Strangers were now debating whether his children belonged to their own family history. Meghan sat beside him and waited. She had expected anger. Instead, she saw him searching for words that would protect Archie and Lilibet without reopening the war. Then Harry released his response. The world expected an attack on Charles and William. Instead, his documented public statement declared that no institution could grant or remove the qualities that defined his children. He refused to accuse his father directly. He refused to name his brother. One sentence changed the coverage completely. Harry said Archie and Lilibet would understand their heritage without being taught that a title determined their value. Broadcasters repeated the line throughout the day. Charles read the statement twice. The king quietly said, "That is the father I hoped he would be." William heard those words and requested one final private call with Harry. The crown had delivered its judgment. Harry had delivered his answer. Now the brothers had to decide what, if anything, could still be saved. No decree restored the titles. No dramatic reversal emerged from the palace. Charles did not withdraw his signature, and William did not renounce his endorsement. Yet the final meaning of the crisis was not written in the royal framework. It was revealed days later, when Harry answered his brother's call, and the two men finally spoke without arguing about rank, duty, or succession. For the first time, they confronted the deeper wound. Children had become symbols in a battle they never created. Harry listened as William spoke without advisors, secretaries, or prepared language. The palace framework, the formal set of rules defining future royal roles, remained unchanged. Archie and Lilibet would keep their family connection and places in the line of succession, but no automatic path remained toward working titles, ceremonial offices, or official duties. Blood still connected them to the crown. Service would now determine whether that connection became a public role. William did not defend himself immediately. The prince allowed his brother to say what had been building since the document arrived. Harry told him the signature felt like abandonment. It was not merely an endorsement of policy. It told him that his own brother had accepted a future in which Archie and Lilibet stood outside the institution their cousins would inherit. Harry's voice hardened, but his decision was clear. He would never call the ruling fair. He would never pretend the loss meant nothing. Yet he would not raise his children to measure themselves by what the palace had denied them. Archie and Lilibet would know their history, understand their family, and recognize the complicated legacy behind their names. They would not be trapped by it. William finally admitted that he should have called before signing. The future king could not restore the removed path, but he made one promise without hesitation. George, Charlotte, and Louis would be taught that Archie and Lilibet were family, not rivals, threats, or constitutional problems. The next generation would not inherit the bitterness that had divided their fathers. Charles faced the consequence at Windsor. The king returned the signed framework to its red box, the secure case used for important royal papers, and closed the lid. Then he placed a photograph of Archie and Lilibet beside those of his other grandchildren. The crown had limited their roles. Their grandfather would not erase their place in his heart. Harry's tears marked the death of one expectation, that his children might naturally return to the institution he had left. But that loss forced him to choose fatherhood over royal approval. The monarchy gained certainty while exposing the human cost of protecting itself. Archie and Lilibet lost promised titles. They did not lose their identity, dignity, heritage, or family. The document decided how the crown would recognize them, but Harry's final choice decided how his children would recognize themselves, and in that distinction, the family's most painful chapter finally reached its end. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.